Funding for the production of Folks is made possible in part by a grant from Union National Life Insurance, serving Louisiana and the South since 1926, a family-managed corporation providing whole life insurance.
Are minorities more vulnerable to telephone ripoffs? What are your rights under the Credit Protection Act? Can companies that claim to help repair a troubled credit rating do something that the consumer cannot do for himself? The answers to these questions and more on today's edition of Folks. Hello everyone, welcome to Folks. I'm Sonya Masingale. As the holidays get closer, if you're like most people, you're wondering how you can afford all of the luxuries that the season demands. Some people have already prepared and budgeted for their purchases. Others will overspend and get in trouble with their creditors. Today, we're going to take a look at credit and consumer protection and what you can do for yourself if you're in trouble with your creditors. We'll also take a look at some telephone scams and find out how to avoid being ripped off. But first, we talk to some consumers about their experiences with credit. The holiday season is upon us, and most people are carefully selecting gifts for friends and family in spite of hard economic times. Cold hard cash is getting harder to come by, and fluctuations in the current economy are causing the dollar to decrease in value against rising consumer costs. How will people cope with the monetary shortfall this holiday season? And will credit cards play a major role in their purchases? Are you charging or paying cash for your Christmas presents this year?
I'll be paying cash this year.
Why is that?
I feel like I can get in trouble if I charge, so it'd probably be best if I were just to pay cash.
Are you going to spend more money this year than last year?
Probably be less this year.
Why is that?
Well, for one thing, I'm in college, so I have to watch my budget, and also just with the way the economy is, it'd probably be best if I were just to spend less.
Have you ever applied for a credit card and been refused?
Well, yes, I have. I had a problem initially getting a credit card, being my first time to establish credit. It's somewhat of a vicious cycle. They wouldn't give me a credit card unless I had credit, but yet I couldn't find a place to establish credit, so I finally do have one.
Do you know what your credit rights are under the law?
Somewhat. I don't have them all with me, but I do know that I have quite a few.
Are you charging your Christmas presents this year?
I imagine, yes.
Do you think you'll spend more money this year on presents than you've spent in, say, the past 5 years?
Well, I would say yes, because the price of presents are higher this year.
Have you ever applied for a credit card and been refused?
No, ma'am. I haven't.
Do you know what your credit rights are by law?
Kind of. No, I don't. I've never investigated that.
Have you ever applied for a credit card and been turned down?
Yes, I have.
Why?
Because of several different reasons. I'm separated, and it's really hard for a separated woman and not having enough income.
So what did you do about it?
Nothing. I should have, but nothing.
Okay, so do you know what your rights are concerning credit?
Basically, but not thoroughly.
Are you charging or paying cash for your Christmas purchases this year?
Paying cash.
Why is that?
So I don't have to pay interest rates to credit cards.
Are you going to spend more money this year than last, and why?
I'm going to spend less because everyone in my family is adults and they already have everything that they need.
Have you ever applied for a credit card and been turned down?
Yes, I have.
Well, what did you do?
I just kept on trying until somebody finally broke down and gave me credit, and that was my bank. And I was refused because all the credit was on my husband's name, and I was divorced. And in order to get a credit card, you need to have established credit. Well, how can you, if you don't have established credit, how can you establish it?
Do you know what your credit rights are under the law?
Somewhat.
Could you tell us what they are?
Well, I do know that you can't be turned down because of sex or your race or your marital status.
Are you charging or paying cash for your Christmas purchases this year?
I charge.
Why?
because it's more convenient to me. I only have to pay one bill at the end, and I know exactly how much it is.
Will you be spending more money this year than, say, in the past 5 years?
No, I'll be spending less probably.
Why is that?
Because I have less. That's usually why I spend less.
Have you ever applied for a credit card and been refused?
Yes, I was refused the very first time by Macy's in New York City. We had just moved there, and we hadn't established credit yet. And I was so offended that when they have recently offered me a credit card, I said, no, thank you, keep it. So I don't use Macy's anymore.
Do you know what your credit rights are under the law?
Most of them. I've never had to follow through with any problem with anything, so but I have a good idea what they are.
Are you charging your Christmas presents this year or paying cash?
I'm charging most of them on a credit card.
Why?
Because I'm ordering from catalogs a great deal, and that's the easiest way to deal with them. They're not stores necessarily with which I have an account, and there's no easy way to pay cash.
Are you going to spend more money this year than last, do you think?
I think I'm going to spend about the same. I may be slightly more conservative.
Why is that?
I would have to honestly say, to some extent, the economy in the state makes me a little nervous.
Have you ever applied for a credit card and been refused?
No, but my husband's a banker.
Most people know that they have some credit rights protected by law, but they don't know what they are. David Czernik of the Louisiana Consumer League and consumer columnist for the Baton Rouge Morning Advocate says you're cheating yourself by not finding out what they are and using them. We're here at the Louisiana Consumer League to find out more.
The Consumers League is a statewide consumer advocacy and information referral organization. It was founded back in 1968 by just a handful of folks, and it's operated as a mostly volunteer organization throughout all these years. And I'm the third executive director the organization's had, and I came here from Washington for Nader's organization.
What do you actually do?
Several things. The most important function that we probably have in the state right now is providing basic consumer information and referral assistance service. And for my purposes and for the organization's long-term purpose, the advocacy dimension, lobbying at the legislature as the Louisiana Consumers League, is critical, that we get laws, that we get regulations to help consumers as well as protect them from marketplace forces that don't have a counterbalance because the state closed down its Consumer Protection Office, and the Attorney General's office, which is even more critical, basically gave up their consumer unit for budget reasons.
Okay, what about these telephone scams that we're hearing about? Are blacks more vulnerable to those things, and why?
Well, I think that proportionally they are, because they prey upon folks who traditionally have a lower education background, and you know, it's not a black-white issue as it is an economic issue where people call up, it sounds real good, it doesn't seem to cost a whole lot of money. What the callers and the boiler rooms are looking for is a credit card number that they can exploit, and usually if a product is given or if a prize is given, it's worthless, it's cheap, it's garbage, and people wind up losing a tremendous amount of money, especially in the scams that involve buying clubs, and that's going around the Baton Rouge area. It's going around the whole state right now.
How does that work?
You pay a certain amount a month into this club. It operates sort of like what a legitimate co-op would do, and it gives you, for the car calling is a good example to use. You pay $100 a month for a year, and then you can get a brand new car at list price. That it's a pyramid that the folks on top buy at wholesale, and then they give it to the consumer who buys into this so-called club for the list price, and any discounts that come from getting more people involved, and no interest. I mean, that's the kicker, is no interest. And I really doubt that people will ever see their money, for one thing, and there are better ways of financing or getting a car than through this kind of operation, because it does operate as a pyramid rather than a cooperative buying club.
How do you identify when something is a scheme or a ripoff?
Basically by how it sounds. We get calls from people asking questions, and we can do a little bit of investigating with the limited time that we have. by asking them to provide us the information that they've received, literature, contracts, and then I have attorneys that I can go to seek recommendations. Usually at a glance, I can tell whether it's legitimate or not. If the company is bonded, is a good indication that it's not. If it's not bonded, it won't be around a long time. And just little snippets of, are they offering something that they cannot possibly afford, and are they asking for a lot of money up front for something in return down the line, which is an indication that something may be wrong.
So are they all suspicious, that kind of buying club?
I think so. Right now, the way the economy is and the lack of consumer protection, there's a lot of scams being run. So 9 times out of 10, I recommend people not waste their money.
It's also been said that blacks are vulnerable to credit problems. Why is that?
Again, that's another economic, if you're economically disadvantaged, you're going to be real vulnerable. That the credit either is not available, or you don't have the credit history or a working credit-worthy history to get good rates. And that's what, as consumers, we're always looking for, are good rates. You know, the lower interest credit cards and lower financing on goods and furniture, for example, that we may want to buy. So businesses set up in the poor black neighborhoods, like furniture stores, for example, and have finance companies available that charge 28, 30, 35, 36% interest, which is usurious and ridiculous, but they're exploiting a very targeted and vulnerable population, because they can't go out, they can't go walk in the bank and say, I want to borrow $3,000 at 9.5% or 10.5%, because the bank will laugh them out the doors. You know, they don't have the quality history that they require of people of upper income means, and therefore they're higher risks to the businesses, and therefore they get ripped off, in my view.
So if you are a person who's economically disadvantaged, say on a fixed income or with a less than average salary, is it best not to even have credit?
Well, you need credit to participate in the economy, and nationally as well as locally, and that's how a lot of stores do business. And what low-income consumers need to do is band their buying power together and using organizational forces like we have to be able to, with a large and concerted and strategized effort, to go after to target the businesses, to boycott businesses that are charging ridiculously high rates of interest through their financing programs, and to use the market forces to the consumer's advantage, and not merely to let the merchant have the entire advantage. You know, it's our money that's going into that store, and if they don't have our money, they don't do business and they go out of business. And merchants have to realize that it's a two-way street, and consumers have just as much rights and just as much power to divest them of their store as they do to deny sales.
Okay. For those consumers in Louisiana who have been hit real hard by the economic downturn and maybe have gotten in trouble with their creditors, what about those agencies that promise for $600 or $700 to write their credit and help them get loans and credit cards?
This is a case where a tremendous amount of consumer education needs to be done very, very quickly, and we're available to do that sort of thing with some volunteer help if we can get it, where learning what your rights are as a consumer, what your credit rights are, will save you the money that going to a so-called credit repair clinic or credit repair organization offers for several $100s. You as a consumer can do for yourself for about $15. That's all. If you have been rejected for credit, you can get a copy of your credit history for free within 30 days of requesting it in writing from the credit bureau. Other than that, you just have to pay $15, or I think between $15 and $18, and get a copy of it, and you can look to see if there's something wrong. And what the credit repair people do is, supposedly, allegedly, have their consumers challenge everything in the history. And the way the Credit Reporting Act works is that if the creditor doesn't get back to the reporting agency within 30 days, then it's taken off the record. And what you can conceivably do with this method is short-circuit the entire credit reporting system in very quick order. Because if you don't have accurate records, or if things are abused that are consumer oriented, which credit repair or the Credit Reporting Act was meant to do. Who's worthy of credit, who's not worthy of credit. You know, if you've got a valid claim, to go and challenge it and have it taken care of and corrected so that, you know, what's being reported is accurate and fair. And the other thing is, if you're not able to go through the process that's available for challenging the credit history, you can have your side of the story put into the record, and, you know, a few minimal number of words, but you can get it in there so that it's not merely one-sided, and consumers have a lot of recourse.
What if you know there's something wrong with your credit record? What if you went without paying rent for 3 months, 1 year, or something like that? Those agencies guarantee for that amount of money that they can fix it. How could you fix it?
They can't guarantee it. It's illegal for them, under the law that was passed in Louisiana this past session, for them to make guarantees that they cannot meet. And they have to also provide what it's going to cost them to do what, which they didn't do before. It's impossible to make guarantees to anybody, either for us or for somebody who's trying to make a buck off of fixing credit. You can't make 100% guarantees that they'll be able to take care of problems. If the problems are there, we have to live with them and suffer the consequences for trouble that we had. And that's, unfortunately, that's part of the system. It's cumbersome, and to some extent it is unfair. Like with the check fax, if you've got one check returned and it's reported at check fax, even though you may have made good on it right away, you're stuck with that for a year, and you've got a bad mark on your check history for a whole year. And in quarterly periods, it gets graduated back down to a 2 or a 1. But
okay, well, that brings us to the other, what they call nonprofit agencies, such as family debt counselors and things like that. Or what do they do that the consumer can't do for themselves?
Well, actually, what they do, a tremendous program, because they offer mediation services, and it's only $20 one time. And they help the consumer, the family, structure their debt, you know, to work with the creditors to avoid bankruptcy, to find out what the big problem is. You know, if credit cards are being used for grocery bills and normal expenses that should be budgeted out of income, then to try and either cut up the credit cards and then work within means, or, you know, to structure debt so that it's paid off within a specific period of time. And it's a great service. I think that's one of the best things available for consumers who are really in a hole and not quite at the level of bankruptcy.
How do you know when you're getting in trouble with your credit cards?
Basically, you know, the theory is you're supposed to be 30%, the ratio of 30% debt, no more than 30% of your income. And if it starts getting to be more than that, towards 50%, then something is really wrong. Then your expendable income is reduced to the point of hand-to-mouth living.
Okay, you mean 30% of your total income. Now that's, you don't count things like mortgages and things like that.
There's a way of figuring out, you know, what your rent, utilities, grocery bills, charge cards, all that, meshing that together, what your debt ratio is, and to have an accurate assessment, and then to figure out there's budgeting plans that you can just like fill in the blanks, and then see what your financial picture is.
How can the consumer learn all of this?
Well, we have the information available in our office. It's limited, and we also can tell folks where they can write on how to get copies of things, and we can't afford to mass mail or deliver a lot of the information that we do have available, but folks can get it over the phone from us, or we can send them in the right direction.
What are some of the more significant laws pertaining to protecting the consumer's credit?
Well, there's basically 3. There's the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and the Fair Billing Act. Fair Debt Collection Practices Act basically prohibited a lot of the terrible things that bill collectors traditionally did. You know, call up late at night, call up early in the morning. Now they're limited to between 8 in the morning and 9 at night. And then you can negotiate when they can call or if they can call. If your employer doesn't like it, you can have that calling to your business, place of business, stopped with a letter. preferably registered and return receipt requested. But also the best thing with the credit law is kind of there's a preventive step. Before you get into trouble, try and talk to the creditor directly and set something up so that they don't turn it over to a collection agency. Because it is really difficult once a collection agency has it to call off the dogs, as it were. And some of them are more reputable than others. And there's a state association of bill collectors, Louisiana Collectors Association, which has a committee of their own to look at grievances from consumers. I haven't seen it work yet, but theoretically they have that available.
Is it true that if you go to a family debt counseling service that it also goes in your credit record? And does it count against you?
I'm not sure about that. I hadn't heard that before.
Okay. Is it true that blacks have more trouble qualifying for credit than other people?
To the extent that blacks make up a majority of the lower income population in this state, yes. I mean, it's tied to economics. If it was prejudicial because of race, then there's the Equal Credit Opportunity Law, which protects from racial discrimination as well as sex discrimination in credit application.
And how about women?
Women have a real tough time. It's like we're coming out of the dark ages in recent history in terms of dealing with women in general. And now the Equal Credit Opportunity Law protects women from discrimination, but it's a matter of, you got women who piggybacked on their husband's credit for a long time, and then they try to establish their own, and it's still tough because either their income, if they aren't working, isn't listed, and a lot of the steps early on that need to be done to establish credit take a much longer and more difficult time to become established.
Okay. For someone who's new to credit, how could they go about establishing it?
They basically need to do is go and get a department store charge card. If they don't have a credit history, go to some place that you're used to doing business. That some place that knows you. I mean, some of the big stores like Sears and Maison Blanche and those folks, they may not know you from hole in the ground, but they more readily give you credit. And what a lot of this is an irony. When you graduate from high school, you wind up usually getting a credit card application as a preferred customer, and it's real easy from the onset to go into debt. Here's a credit card. Not to mention the fact that when you're in high school, you usually don't get any instruction on what you do with credit.
Well, that was my next statement. It's people aren't given any formal instruction in managing money personally, hardly at all, or tax laws or managing credit.
Exactly.
What needs to be done
That's
on a
failure
grassroots
in the
level?
school system, I think. I got it when I was going to school in Chicago, in high school, and it was for me that was a very valuable course. I don't see it happening here. Bits and pieces are available depending on the awareness of the teacher wanting to do something. High school programs generally don't have something like that, or it's not available so that all students should or could take it. It's limited attendance. And that has to be what we're trying to do at the Consumers League through the Consumer Self-Help Center is come up with some informative, easy-to-read brochures on basic rights so that folks can have that and run with it. And we'll have some of those available by the end of this year through a grant that we received on landlord-tenant and lemon law, the new car lemon law, things like that. What I would love to do is get some experts in the area of credit to do some seminars in the major population areas. And that, like everything else, takes money, and we're limited in terms of what we can start branching out into. And since this is a one-horse show for the time being, I have to be very careful about my energy and resources.
In your lobbying efforts, have you considered going to the educational lobbyists and trying to get this included in our educational system here in Louisiana?
Well, I didn't. Last year was my first year to lobby in Louisiana, and I hadn't done that. I think this year, with education being, I think, the primary focus besides the budget morass, I would like to push for that. I don't know how successful I'll be, but I think once they hear it, they can run with it because it is important. And the fact is, there's no institutionalized supportive services available to consumers in Louisiana. So if it doesn't come from education, it's not going to come from anywhere.
Well, that's it for this week's program. We'll be off the air for 3 weeks during LPB's Winter Festival, but be sure to join us on December 20th for an all-new Christmas special edition of Folks. See you then. Bye-bye.
Funding for the production of Folks is made possible in part by a grant from Union National Life Insurance, serving Louisiana and the South since 1926, a family-managed corporation providing whole life insurance.